being in this beautiful setting distracts us from the weekly headlines of collapse. Grids failing, water running out, jobs disappearing. But what if the very crises that are forcing us to adapt could help us see vision and build something better? I have been working with people and partners across the country to try and bridge the gap between capital and impact. And one thing is clear, we have extraordinary potential. South Africans are masters at survival, but survival is not a strategy. So I invite you to imagine that it's 2040. Load shedding is history, clean water flows, and cities run on clean energy. Communities that once faced unemployment now thrive in green jobs. Our financial systems have also evolved because resilience is a core metric and no longer just an afterthought. We have banks and pension funds that confidently invest in sustainable infrastructure. And insurance rewards adaptability. And we have green finance that flows through capable local institutions. Clean water, productive land, and jobs with dignity. However, right now, it feels like resilience is our national personality. Forged by challenge, but ready for renewal. That South Africa that we imagined can be a reality if we move from finite capital to infinite resilience. I remember Cape Town's day zero, when the city nearly ran out of water. People and farmers slashed consumption. Businesses recycled grey water. The city issued a green bond to upgrade infrastructure. This was an important signal, but not the solution. Eventually, the rains did come, but by then, the city had learned to live entirely differently. And we must also remember that many informal settlements were living in severe water scarcity far before the crisis emerged. The real success came from collective adaptation. Behavior, policy, and finance moving together. That's the beauty of resilient finance, when it enables but doesn't replace human response. So what do I mean by financial resilience? It's the ability for markets to adapt to, withstand, and really absorb shocks, all while keeping sustainability and growth at the center. Financial resilience systems anticipate risk, they mobilize capital for adaptability, and they protect vulnerable people, all while being aligned to the various global frameworks. The challenge we have is that our financial architecture was built for a stable world that no longer exists, reacting to crisis instead of anticipating it. So what does that mean for us here at home? So the UN Global Climate Panel says that we need hundreds of trillions of US dollars by mid-century to tackle climate change. In South Africa, the Just Energy Investment Plan, that's the roadmap to get us to a low carbon economy, estimates that over the next 5 years, we'll need about $98 billion. That won't get us fully through the transition, but it's a good start. So far, we've secured about $11.5 billion through partners like the EU, the UK, the US, and Germany. Here's the problem. More than half of that is loans that needs to be repaid. About a quarter is commercial investments that seek returns, and only 7% is grants. That's the catalytic capital that absorbs risks and unlocks the rest. So essentially, for every R1 we raise for resilience, we need to pay back 93 cents, most often in a foreign currency. That's not resilience, that's fragility financed. Last year, I had a great experience where I met a wonderful, remarkable young entrepreneur. He was turning invasive wassail trees into sustainable charcoal. He joined a catalytic program that took public incentives and turned it into private investment. In 1 year, he had hired 20 youth and he had restored local grazing lands, turning an environmental problem into an economic solution. That, for me, is what financial resilience looks like. When you bring capital and capability with purpose and opportunity. The problem is that these kinds of stories, unfortunately, are still the exception. Too often, capital flows to the mega projects. So utility scale, solar and wind farms that promise greater returns. And the community initiatives that upskill youth and restore lands are so often left behind. Recently, I've had the privilege of working with the Just Energy Transition Project Management Unit. These are the people who are trying to turn paper and the policy into actual projects. What we've learned is we are not short on talent or ideas. What we lack is pathways that connect capital to investable, impact-ready solutions. Across the country, investable businesses and solutions already exist. We have youth recycling businesses, we have land restoration projects, solar co-ops. And what the JET platform is trying to do is really bring these to life. And how it's doing that is by saying, let's test these initiatives against criteria and then try and connect them with investors. Because $98 billion is not coming from a few mega projects. It's coming from a local, living ecosystem. In order to see how this kind of finance could work, let's travel 10,000 kilometers to the Galapagos Islands. So, when Ecuador tried to protect one of the world's most fragile marine ecosystems, it enlisted the help of a company called Capital Fund Managers, co-founded and run out of South Africa, to facilitate the world's largest debt for nature swap. What they did was extraordinary. They took debt and they turned it into climate action through really clever layered funding models. So initially, donor and grant money and public funds took the initial risk. Then they brought in concessional loans to mobilize capital. And then finally, once the project had proved itself, then the institutional investors came in. And the results were remarkable. So the renewable projects decreased diesel imports by up to 60%, created local jobs, and protected the ecosystem. Importantly also is that communities had a stake in the outcome. So it strengthened both the ecosystem and the nation's balance sheet. Perhaps I can compare it to if you wanted to buy a house and also pay for your child's education. So your aunt, who really believes in the potential of your child, pays the deposit on the house. Your interest rate is lowered, you can then get a loan from the bank, and then maybe there's a private investor who also wants to come in. You've got a property that maybe you want to, a cottage that you want to rent out. All of these things together make it possible for you to buy the house and keep your child in school. So that's what happened here with the Galapagos Islands, is that donor money took the initial shock and brought in the private sector funding, and the result was conservation and stability. We also have similar structures here in South Africa that are alive. So if you think about the Green Outcomes Fund, it's taken 100 million rand in public money and then created 4 times that in private sector funding in order to create small green jobs, which obviously creates jobs, and it builds resilience. So, how do we shift the system? In my view, there's 3 levers. Firstly, we need to build capacity on both sides. So, communities need skills in governance and finance, and investors need fluency in local context, because trust is the currency of resilience. Second, we need to de-risk resilience, so use guarantees, donor and public funding, concessional loans to lower the risk and bring in the public funds. And then finally, we need to make resilience attractive, lower interest rates for climate outcomes, and reward long-term sustainable views through policy and pricing. And I know it's been mentioned here today, but I'm quite passionate that as we look at this, we need to ensure that the systems are inclusive. Make sure we bring in women, young people, communities at the forefront of change. If we do that, profits increase, outcomes improve, and resilience deepens. That's not charity, it's smart economics. What's government's role in all of this? They need to signal through clear policy and meaningful incentives. Government needs to structure catalytic funds and risk-sharing mechanisms, and then they need to simplify, cut the red tape, so funds can flow freely to the investable projects. Because if we have climate-aware governance, green markets, and an inclusive transition, then we can turn climate fragility into a competitive advantage, building resilience, creating equity, and propelling growth. Now that's strategy. In finite games, there are winners. In infinite games, there are players who keep playing. For too long, finite games have been played by the finance sector. Short-term profits, quarterly results, and then the CEO gets fired. But inequality and climate change are infinite challenges. By building financial resilience, we are not just securing the next quarter, we are securing the next generation. The just energy transition is more than a climate plan. It is a social and financial contract between citizens, markets, and government. When we finance resilience, we finance futures. We change the question from how much will it cost to what future are we buying? Financial resilience is not about surviving the storm. It's about learning to build in the rain. From finite capital to infinite resilience. Now that's the investment of our lifetime.